The Middle Ages/medieval period. The Middle Ages was a time period between the 5th and 15th century. It began after the fall of Rome in 476 AD. They immediately entered a dark ages where temperatures dropped and food supply declined. Here are some images depicting the Middle Ages. The fall of Rome. In 476 AD, Odoacer, a Roman soldier, got rid of the last Roman emperor and became the king of Italy. There was no single power to control after the fall of Rome, so the Catholic Church took over. The kings and queens gained power from their alliances with the Church. Germanic invaders began to storm Rome, where they adopted Christianity and worshipped in monasteries established by Pope Benedict. Gregory I became the first pope and expanded the Pope Secular's power, which meant that the Church was now involved in world politics. Feudalism. After Charlemagne's death, his kingdom was split. Many people fought for and gave away his land to gain the faith of others. Feudalism continued. The European feudal system contained kings, nobles, knights, peasants. Lords were the owners of the land. Fiefs were land grants, and a vassal is the person who receives a fief. A knight is a horseman who fights for the lords and kings. Serfs are people bound to the land, and a manor is the lord's estate. Peasants' lives weren't very prosperous due to their obligations to the lord. And tithe is the church tax accepted as part of Christ's teachings. The Age of Chivalry. There was constant fighting between lords for land. Knights used chivalry, which was a complex set of ideals that demanded loyalty to the knight's earthly lord, his heavenly lord, and his chosen lady. At 7 years old, knights were sent to be pages for the lords and knights. At 14 years old, he became a squire, which was a servant of a knight, and at 21 he became a knight, where he competed in tournaments, which were mock battles that included jousting and sword fighting. Literature and chivalry. Literature glorified knighthood and warfare. Troubadours were traveling poets/musicians who performed at castles and told the tales of brave knights. The church power increases. The church grew as lords fought for the control of the land, and they believed that the emperor and pope should work together. The pope was the Catholic Church leader. Bishops supervised multiple churches. Priests were individual church supervisors, and the clergy were leaders of the Catholic Church, which fell under the power of the pope. Medieval Christians. They led a harsh life and participated in sacraments, which are important religious ceremonies, and they paved the way for salvation. They taught how to become Christian, and the church's authority was religious and political, which includes the Pope and the Emperor. They had the canon law, which was the law of the church, and all medieval Christians had to obey, including the kings. There are 2 punishments if the law of the church is not obeyed. Excommunication, which means they were denied salvation, and interdict, which means sacraments could not be performed and they would be doomed to go to hell. The Church and the Holy Roman Empire. Otto I ruled Germany and followed Charlemagne's examples. They invaded Italy for the Pope and created the Holy Roman Empire. It lasted until 1100. Popes resented German power over Italy and kingly power overall. They lay investiture, which is a ceremony in which kings/nobles can be appointed church officials. It led to problems between the church and the state. The disputes. It led to the Concordat of Worms, which stated that only the church could appoint a bishop and the emperor could veto the appointment. Germany remained separate as rulers for the lords fought for control. Age of faith/religious order. There were church problems, and the priests were not educated and had families. Simony is when bishops would sell their positions in the church. Friars would travel to spread Christian ideals, and women would found convents and help the poor. Gothic churches emphasized light and large windows and were very inviting and large, and they were intended to inspire people. The Crusades. The Byzantine Empire asked for help against the Muslim Turks, and Pope Urban II called for a holy war, and the Crusades began. The king and the church saw the Crusades as a way to gain control of the Holy Lands, and a way to rid themselves of knights that fought too much, and a way to gain influence and money. Those who fought were guaranteed to go to heaven. The church won the First Crusade. Muslims, operating under Saladin, won the Second Crusade. The Third Crusade, led by Richard the Lionhearted, ended in truce. in which Saladin promised that unarmed Christian pilgrims could visit the city's holy palace. The Fourth Crusade failed, and that led to Crusade support's decline. Children's Crusade was a tragedy. Spanish Crusade ended in Moors controlling all of Spain, and the Reconquista was an attempt to get rid of all the Moors. Inquisition was when Isabella and Ferdinand used the court system to rid itself of heresy. Many people converted so the church would not torture them. Occasionally, even those who converted were brought into court, tortured, and burned at the stake. The Crusades' effect. The church lost power and the Holy Land was never recovered. Millions of people died. The fall of Constantinople. Goods exchanged among the newly developed trade network, hatred between Muslims and Christians was established, and towns grew in size. Here are some images depicting the Crusades. The medieval society changes. Population growth. There was growth in food supply, and they used the 3-field system. 2 fields were planted and 1 was rested. Farmers could grow more food, people could eat, and therefore they were happier. The European economy developed. Guilds, the organization of people, and the same business worked to improve the economic/social conditions of its members were developed. Productivity increased overall. Changes in medieval society. Guilds became influential in the economy and government. The commercial revolution, trade and business expanded. There were larger trade routes. Banks were established. Serfs moved into town. Merchants' taxes increased the king's power, and cities began to thrive. Serfs fled from manors. Burghers were merchant-class town dwellers and resented the feudal system. They demanded rights and fought against their lords. There was growth in universities. Poets used vernacular/everyday language of their homelands. Learning was encouraged. Thomas Aquinas, a scholar who questioned faith versus reason/logic, met with scholastics to debate the issues of their time, and studied Greece and its democratic traditions. England and France. England was constantly being attacked and invaded. The Normans invaded a region of northern France. William the Conqueror took control of England at the Battle of Hastings in 1066. He kept 1/5 of the land to himself and divided the rest among his lords, which unified the lands, and he laid foundations for centralized government in England. England government grows. Kings was to control land in England and France. Henry II was King of England and gained French land through marriage. Institutes, judges/juries formed common law. They formed the basis of law in most English-speaking countries. King John signed the Magna Carta in 1215. The Magna Carta limited the power of the king and guaranteed basic political rights. In 1295, Edward I summoned the townsmen and knights to raise taxes. Parliament was formed by the legislative body, which was made up of the House of Lords and House of Commons. French rulers. The Capetian dynasty began. It lasted from 987 to 1328. Philip II expanded the French lands. And Philip IV questioned the Pope's authority. He called meetings of lords and bishops and included commoners. The Estates General Meeting was 3 estates: the church leaders, lords, and commoners. Pope Boniface and Philip argued. Philip threw the Pope in prison, on which he died. In 1305, a new Pope was chosen and moved to Avignon, France. 2 popes were chosen, 1 Roman and 1 French. The Great Schism was an event in which both popes called the other false. In 1417, the Council of Constance chose Martin as pope. The church begins to lose power. Scholars began to question the church's power. John Wycliffe claimed that Jesus was the head of the church, not the pope, which inspired the English translation of the New Testament. A Bohemian professor taught Bible as the final authority. The bubonic plague. In 1300, Europe suffered from the bubonic plague. It began in Asia and spread quickly. 1/3 of Europe's population died. Town populations fell, trades declined, and prices increased. Jews were blamed and killed, and the church became even weaker. The 100 Years' War. It was between France and England from 1337 to 1453, 116 years. English King Edward III claimed the French throne, and the longbow arrived and changed the warfare. It began the end of knight dependence. Joan of Arc was a French peasant girl who led France to victory, and Charles was crowned king. The 100 Years' War. Joan of Arc was captured in England and burned at the stake for being a witch. France and England changed, and nationalist feelings rose, and the king became the national leader. The power of French monarch increased, and the religious devotion of the code of chivalry fell apart. England began a time of turmoil and fought amongst each other, which was known as the War of Roses. The Middle Ages ended in the 15th century, and that's when the modern world was considered to have begun. The end.